I'm delighted to be here in part because when I was invited, I wrote back and I said, you got the wrong guy because I don't do statistical models, I can't count, I can't do any of these things that you people are famous for, I don't draw pictures. I'm a humanist at heart, you know, I'm a guy who does stuff, and so you really don't want me. And so they wrote back and they said, well, we have this empty place and we have to fill it, and so you're our guy. So here I am. Now, the thing I'm going to talk about today is how you can tell whether research universities are any good in the first instance, and in the second instance, what we think is going to happen to research universities over, say, the next 10 to 20 years. Now, how do we know? Well, of course, we don't know, but you know, we're academics, and when we talk about the future, nobody remembers, when we get to the future, what we said about the future, so we can speculate with great enthusiasm. Now, the thing about American research universities is that they are quite extraordinary enterprises, as you all know, because all of you have been at one time or another associated with these research universities. And oftentimes when we hear about what's going on in American higher education, everybody sort of homogenizes all of these institutions that we have out there that give bachelor's degrees and master's degrees and doctoral degrees as if they're one thing. But of course, they're not one thing. There's a big industry that's highly differentiated by type of institution. Our interest at the Center for Measuring University Performance is focused on what we call research universities. Now, research universities we define very broadly. We say any university that generates something on the order of $40 million in federal research expenditures a year, we'll call them a research university. Now, of course, the difference between one at the $40 million break point and somebody at the top, leaving out Johns Hopkins, but everybody else, you know, it's at least 10 times difference, at least $400, $500, $600 million in federal research up there at the top of the stack. And we go down to about 40. And you'd think, well, gee, that's pretty generous. But it's not so generous because there's only 160 of them. There's about 160 universities in the United States that are at that level out of the some 2,400 odd that provide four-year degrees. In addition, there's about 900 and some odd universities that get some form of federal research money that they spend over a 5-year period. If you look back and you say, okay, who got any federal research money reported by NSF on their S&E survey, what you end up with are about 985 institutions that get some amount of money. Down there at the bottom, they're getting $1.95 and change, but they are getting the money and they're reporting it. So we're looking at this 160 universities. They're the big deal. They're the main event. They set the standards that everybody else in one way or another follows. And it's because not only are they wonderful and terrific, because we all graduated from them and teach in them and all that, that's why they're wonderful, and we just heard about the mentors and all that. So clearly, they're wonderful also because we graduate people who go out and set the standards everywhere else. All right? So the values that we impart in these research universities are the values that get propagated throughout the system. And I tell people, if you think research is a small thing and not important, what you need to do is focus. You need to focus on the most prestigious teaching institutions in America. You know, take Amherst College or Williams College or Pomona College, those people with outrageous endowments who have the highest selectivity in the Western world, and you look on their websites and you say, what do they tout of their faculty achievement? That they're the best teachers in the world? Well, yes, but what they really tout is that they can do research. Right? So in their little profiles of the wonderful faculty at Amherst College, what does it say? This faculty member has done research and published in this area, basic research and published in this area, basic research and published in that area. Why is that? That's because research is hard, research is important, and research is the primary determinant of quality and prestige amongst universities in the United States. Now, the reason we got into this business is we were trying to figure out what is it that makes the winners amongst American research universities. What are the characteristics that define the very best, most competitive, most outrageous research universities in the country? And we found that the rankings are totally useless, as you all know. We've written many papers to define the rankings as useless, and nobody pays any attention. They just go out and buy U.S. News and World Report every year. They report it, you know. People who know better put it on the face of their website, you know. And if it's a good ranking, they say, look how much better we are. If it's a bad ranking, they say, God, the methodology sucks. But the point is, everybody is interested in how they rank next to each other because higher education at the research level is probably one of the most competitive enterprises in America. It is ruthlessly competitive because what you need to be a good research university is a scarce element, and that's talent. You have to have talent. And that talent is mostly faculty talent that is then surrounded by a whole bunch of other support. But basically, if you can't recruit the top faculty members to come to the university, if you can't sustain them and you can't support them, then you can't compete. And the reason that happens is that, excuse me, the reason that happens is because the top research faculty require a tremendous amount of support and effort if they're going to succeed. So when I look at research faculty members and I say, well, how do we know we're winning? We have a bunch of data points that we use in our study. And these data points are not selected because they're the best. They're selected because they're the only ones. Right? They're the only ones. We live in a data-poor environment when we study research universities because there's no way to get the data. Universities all lie about any information that is not audited in some fashion or another or is not collected by some outside agency. They all lie. So when they say we have X or we have Y or we have Z, we say, yeah, that's very nice, but let's see where the data comes from. So what can we know? We found about 9 items that we could collect with some degree of reliability. And of course, the first was federal research expenditures. Now, people get mad at me. They say, why don't you use federal awards, right? Because NSF produces also federal awards. The trouble with federal rewards is that you don't know whether the reward is for 1 year or 5 years. You don't know whether it's a continue. You don't know what it's for. But the expenditure data has to be audited. The expenditure data is real stuff. That is, somebody did research for which payment was made and had to be cataloged. And so as a result, this is probably the most reliable measure we have, even though it's by no means complete, doesn't include education, doesn't include lots of other subjects, but it is the main event, and it's what we compete on. Now, in addition, we also collect total research, which is also generated by the federal government. Total research is less reliable in many ways because it includes all kinds of other stuff. It includes state grants, it includes local grants, it includes all kinds of things that aren't peer-reviewed, but it does give you at least a sense of the largest possible research number that you could get, reflecting research activity taking place at a university. So those are the 2 big numbers. All right, then we look at some other things. Excuse me. In line with our prizes that we talked about, we try to capture what it is that the characteristics that make a difference. And the first of these, of course, is faculty. And so we do track faculty awards. And we have an elaborate system for going out and counting up the awards that belong over a 3-year period to each of the institutions in our group. And so we get them in both in science, we get them in humanities, we get them, and of course we use the National Science Academy member as one of the awards, but we don't use the Nobel. And everybody gets mad at us for that. So I want you to recognize that. We don't do the Nobel for this reason. The Nobel recognizes work that was done a long time ago somewhere else. And what we're interested in is what's being done today in this university to see whether it's doing any better than it was last year or 2 years before. And so if you count Nobels, what you're doing is counting as credit to, say, the University of California, Berkeley, which has an unbelievable number of them. Right? You're counting work that was accomplished often someplace else, on somebody else's nickel. And since we're all interested in money, we don't think that's fair. So we don't ever count Nobels. Now we count these other awards, and they're very important. Now, in this structure, the thing to remember about the top universities is that they control the marketplace. Right? They control the marketplace. They control like 92% of the federal research dollars that are spent every year reported by the NSF. 92%. And they represent about 18%, 17, 18% of the institutions that get any kind of federal research money. So when you have a group that controls 92% of that marketplace, you know that you have a set of institutions that have characteristics, right, that are sustaining. Now, they have captured 92% of that marketplace practically forever, right, practically forever. And the amount of change in that group is relatively small. Every now and then, somebody inches up into the top of that group, into the mid-range of that group. Almost nobody ever falls all the way out of that group. It is a self-perpetuating operation. Right? Why is that? because they all compete for the elements that make it possible for them to win that competition. And that element are the faculty. You have to recruit the faculty. Now, in order to recruit the faculty, you have to have certain things, the most important of which is money. Right? You have to have money. People, we always talk about values and truth and justice and the American way. But at the end of the day, the thing that makes the difference is having enough money to subsidize research, which is one of America's great lost leaders. Nobody in the university world makes money on their research enterprise. And this makes everybody mad in the legislature when I tell them that. They say, oh, you got all this money, you guys ought to be rich, you don't need tax dollars. I say, no, we lose money. We lose more money on research than we do on football, although it's hard to believe. Right? It's hard to believe we lose more money on research than we do sports. And the reason for that is that our agencies, especially our wonderful federal government, doesn't pay the full cost of research. I don't have to explain this to you people, right? You guys know all about this. All right, you have to do $200,000 worth of research, and they're going to pay you at best, maybe 150, and you're going to find the other 50 somewhere else. And that somewhere else has to come out of the general university budget. It has to come out of what students are paying in tuition and fees. It has to come out what the legislature is subsidizing through its grants, and it has to come, of course, from the earnings on endowment. Well, when you do that and understand that you have to have all this money because the faculty you want to hire, they're going to come to your university if they're one of these super-duper people who have had great mentors that we heard about. If they're going to come to the university, they want to know that there'll be a platform at that university that will allow them to display their true intellectual brilliance, which they know about, shy people that they are. They know they're brilliant and wonderful, but they know they need stuff in order to display that beautiful wonderfulness on a large stage. And what do they need? They need equipment, they need assistants, they need space, they need labs, they need all kinds of stuff. And they need the university to have a whole apparatus to deal with the bureaucracy, somebody to deal with the money, somebody to deal with this, so they can focus on being terrific, wonderful, super-duper scientist scholars, which they are and they become. But we in the university, who are not so bright but are in charge of the money, right, we have to go get the money to support that activity. Right? Because the faculty, when they come to the university, while they do love their university, they love their national and international reputation more. More. And how do they get that? They get that by doing the kind of publication we've been talking about here today. Right? They all have to publish, and they have to publish constantly, and they have to publish all the time, and they have to apply for those grants. And if they're not supported by a high-powered university infrastructure, that's hard to do, because that's a very competitive business. So universities accumulate money to support that research, and if they're successful in accumulating enough money, and if they're successful in recruiting the faculty to participate in this program at the top level, then they'll end up one of our top American research universities. Now, there's some other characteristics that go along with this game. The first of these is that our faculty love to be in institutions with smart undergraduates. Right? I'm not exactly sure why, because a lot of them don't pay any attention. But still, they like the environment, right? They like the environment. They like these smart kids around. So having a highly selective undergraduate program is an asset in recruiting high-quality research faculty. And sometimes people don't get that connection, that we can get research faculty. We bring them to campus, and we recruit them, and in the process of recruiting, we expose them to the students in our honors college, right? We expose them to the students we just recruited with high SATs. We expose them to the students who are just clever and smart, are going to be teaching some seminar, and they just feel really good. And so they say, well, they care about the students at this level, they're going to care about me at that level. And so that is one of the things that we also have to sustain. Now, when you look at these universities, you find out something else. You have to have scale. Scale is one of the key elements in research university success. If you're not big enough, it's very hard to compete unless you're very, very focused. Most of our research universities are big. Right? The public ones are especially big, and they're big because they have to have that scale in order to get the surplus revenue to subsidize the loss leader of high-powered research. So you have a big university of 50,000 students, and in 50,000 students, you'll be able to make a profit. I don't tell anybody this. You'll be able to make a profit on the undergraduate program, some of which can be shifted over to support right, can support the enterprise of research. Secondly, scale provides you with a protection against the risk of misjudgment in hiring faculty. Because in high-powered research universities, in the end, most of your faculty will be tenured. This problem of contingent faculty is below the line, right? It's a whole bunch of other institutions, but not the research institutions. Research institutions, you're going to have to give tenure. And you're going to have to give tenure after only 5 years. And 5 years isn't long enough, right? It's not long enough to be sure that you got a winner. And so we have to take a risk when we give tenure. Now, in order to sustain that risk, because we know some are going to fail out and are not going to be as productive and wonderful researchers as we had hoped when we gave them tenure, the more you have else to do on campus, the more you can use these high-quality people who still are not fully productive in research but are smart and capable and can do lots of other things, you can support them over here. You can make them university presidents, for crying out loud. Right? There's lots of things you can do with them. You can have them teach courses, which often they like to do. You have them do administrative functions. There's all kinds of things, if you're big, that you can transfer the talent that you recruited and gave tenure to in hopes they would be superb researchers for 30 years. They were superb researchers for 5, maybe 10 after you gave them tenure, and then they just faded, okay? That doesn't mean they're not smart. It doesn't mean they're not fully informed. It doesn't mean they can't be spectacular graduate advisors. It doesn't mean they're spectacular deans or department chairs. There's all kinds of stuff they can do if your place is big enough. And if it's big enough, then you have places to put all of this talent when they don't end up being exactly where you thought they would be when you hired them and gave them tenure. So in order to have all of this success, you need all of these elements, which explains why the top American research universities are a very stable group. They are very stable. So when you read about the end of the world is coming for American higher education, right, subtract the 160 at the top. Right? They're not at risk. There's no risk that any one of those institutions will be in serious financial trouble within the next 10 years. Right? Maybe Illinois, who knows? But otherwise, nobody's going to be in serious financial trouble. Right? Who's going to be in financial trouble? Small, private, liberal arts institutions with less than 1,500 students and no endowment. Those institutions are going to die, right? And they are dying at a higher rate. We lose maybe 3 or 4 of those a year. Right? We used to lose none. Now we're losing 3 or 4. That might accelerate to 5 or 6 a year. So that's a significant number of institutions, and they get a lot of press. But they're not the main event. The main event at the top of these big research universities, they have scale, they have strength, they have power, and they know how to generate the money and maintain their hold on the capture of the key strategic resource for all research universities, and that's high-quality research faculty. Thank you.